So welcome everybody, April 19, 2022. This session is about invoicing and budgets for villages that have contracts with HHS. We're going to begin with introduction. So please just introduce yourself. My name is Pazit Aviv, working with Aging and Disability Services. Tammy. You're on mute.
I'll start over. I'm Tammy Rickman. I'm the long-suffering treasurer for the Villages of Kensington. I didn't realize it was a lifetime appointment.
Some things they don't tell you, so then you won't volunteer.
That's right. Got that figured out.
Doug.
Hi, I'm Doug. Excuse me. I'm Doug Gaddis, Executive Director at Silver Spring Village.
Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Van Loon, and I'm the treasurer at the Village of Tacoma Park.
Helen.
I'm Helen Chernikoff. I'm only a volunteer, and I'm helping out the executive director, Lisa, for Little Falls Village and Friendship Heights Neighbors Network jointly.
Never say only a volunteer. Definitely not in village. You are.
I am happily a volunteer.
It's the backbone of the system, isn't it?
Ken.
I'm Ken Brown, treasurer at Rave, helping Ann out.
Thank you. Ann.
Hi, Ann Herbster, president of Rave.
Linda.
I'm Linda Wiesman. I'm the treasurer of the Village of Catlins and Lakelands.
David.
Good morning, David Salem. I work with Pazit, and I'm the guy who causes so much heartburn.
I have a name, Bobby. Am I seeing? Did they say your name right? Yeah, Bobby. You're frozen. Maybe that's the issue. Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Rambo. I'm the treasurer for the Catlins Community Foundation, which is the parent organization for the villages at Catlins and Lakelands.
Richard.
I assume, is that me?
Oh,
Richard. I'm a Richard also. I'm here. Richard Parker's taking over for Richard Cooperman. He's a former treasurer. I'm taking over for Stonegate Villages. Harvey had something else to do today. He's going to dial in and look at the recorded later.
yeah, he has communicated with me. So there's another person. This is Richard's iPad. Is it another person or two people logging?
No, that's me. That's Rich.
No problem. Yeah, so whatever works. Think we have everybody? Have I missed anyone? No. Oh, sorry, Kate, go ahead.
No, Kate with Bradley Hills Village, executive director, stepping in for our treasurer today.
Okay, so I'm going to be sharing my screen. You go ahead, David.
Anne, you broke up when you were introducing yourself. What village are you from? I know your name, I just can't place the village.
Rockville Area Village Exchange, Rave.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to do the slideshow. There you go. Start from the beginning, the way things ought to be. Okay, so I'm going to start with just saying a few words. One of the reasons we're doing this is because many of you have had lots of back and forth with David and I about invoices and the numbers and the details. And so we decided that it would be really good to bring everybody to this forum and review everything that you probably should know around invoicing. Some of the information we share with you today might be relevant to your specific village, while other not as much. Just bear with us. If you have questions, feel free to just raise them. While I talk, it's going to be really hard for me to monitor the chat. So I don't know if David, if you want to just see whatever questions come up, and if you think there's something that needs to be raised, and then we can respond to it. Just David and I are going to do a tandeming here a lot as we go through this information.
Question, do I need to leave the chat up on my screen in order to see the messages, or will they pop up?
They don't pop up.
Okay, so let's give
But
that
you
a
know,
try.
if you want, because it's a small enough group, if you have a thought, feel free to just jump in and ask the question. We will accommodate so that things have a natural flow to them. Okay. All right, we start with budgets because, I mean, we've done the budget for next FY, but since this is going to be something we do annually, And because sometimes things change mid-year, there's a couple of pointers we want to go over with you. So just so you know, especially for the newbies here, our county fiscal year starts July 1st and June 31st. Some villages' fiscal year starts January 1st and end December 31st. So when we ask you for a budget, your budget needs to be considered considering our fiscal year, not your budget cycle. And sometimes I've received budgets from people thinking that they need to include all their operational budget, including other funding sources. But what we're asking you when you submit a budget to us is only for the contract amount. I mean, it's nice if I have access to your total budget amounts just for general reference, but that is not the document that you provide our contracting team. They don't need to see the entire thing. There's all kinds of things that would help you when you design your budget. And I've had this conversation with many of you over the years. Because we don't have, most of you, the amount you're contracted with us is not very high. It makes more sense for you to choose 1 or 2 items that you're billing us for rather than 10 different items, especially if you have other funding sources that would cover these expenses, because our threshold for what's acceptable as good invoicing practices and backup is pretty high. And as a result, the less backup you need to give us would mean less work on your end and less potential challenges. So I've had several conversations with villages, like if you can just even choose 1 staff salary, 1 contractor, and that would pretty much cover your budgeted amount, that is the best way to go about it. It would reduce burden and ease the process. So figure out your large ticket items, whether it is a staff person. If you don't have staff, think about your large cost of, insurance or large events, and bill us only for that. If you have monthly expenses, such as phone, that's easy as well because it's a monthly recurrence. You know exactly what kind of backup you need to give and it accumulates. So consider ease when you build your budget with us. If you haven't done so until now, this is the time to consider things, how you're gonna change things for next year. When you have miscellaneous stuff, like you bought 5 bubble gum for a volunteer appreciation events, that's where things get really, really cumbersome. And we will go into what's acceptable backup. So you'll see how much backup you need to provide for those miscellaneous. And that's intended to dissuade you as much as possible for going down that route. We understand if you want to do that. It's not as though it's not allowed, but we just want to convey to you the complexity of every single item that you do and avoid that as much as possible. And so to see the last item, not billing the county for items documented by credit card and cash register slips. Because if you do that, then you need to provide us the credit card statement. And if you pay with cash, that's very difficult for us to follow. And in the past year, we've actually had to disallow, which is we did not reimburse for payments made in cash for an event, because there's no way for us to say, okay, who paid that money and how was that reimbursed if it was not, because organizations don't manage cash. So avoid these things as much as possible. If your organization has a credit card and you're using that consistently and we see the same credit card number on all your expenses, that's fine. But if it's these random credit card numbers, we don't know who's the owner of this credit card, how are they connected with your organization, that makes it hard for us to create that paper trail we need to ascertain per payment and purchase. David, do you have any notes to add?
Only that the use of the word miscellaneous isn't intended to minimize the importance of some of these things. That bubble gum is a real volunteer. Was that your example, Pazit? Bubble gum? Did I hear you right?
I just threw out something.
Okay, good. Bubble gum and balloons, that might be, in the scheme of things, a nice touch for volunteers or for whatever purpose. So that it's intended in the sense of scraps of receipts and small costs for which documentation is it worth the time it takes to pull together? No, just clarify.
Yeah, and I think some of you rely on county contract for all their expenses. So if that's the case, it's not, again, we're not telling you don't do that. Just we're going to review the kind of backup that is required so that if you do choose to go through this reimbursement process about those miscellaneous items, that you're very thoughtful about when you make the purchase, you think before, ahead of time, how am I going to pay for that? And how can I show the county the paper trail that we've discussed? And we'll go into this in further detail further down the presentation.
I would like to add, oh, go ahead, Tammy.
We have had in the past a director of events who typically would go out and buy all of the things for the event, save the receipts for me, and give them to me, receipt from Giant for flowers and grapes and cheese. And I would then tote all those up and issue her a reimbursement from our checking account. Would I then for that purpose give you all of these minuscule receipts like from Giant Food for the flowers, or is the reimbursement check that I gave her for this enough?
Yeah.
You want all the paper?
Yeah.
I can produce it, but it's going to be cumbersome. So maybe I should just tell her to use my credit card instead, right?
Yeah, let's begin there. Because the answer is yes to all the paper. If she can take the credit card, the debit card, the credit card, the organizational card, and use it, that's the most direct possible. Otherwise, it's show us that someone purchased something, and then show us that you paid that someone for purchasing something. And I should say, we have a compliance office here in HHS, and there is not a question that I can ask that doesn't turn into more than I expected. Pazit will vouch for that. Simple things that can we just bend the rules a little bit? There's just no bending. I lose every one of those conversations. So that's a really good example, Tammy.
I can think of all the ways in which, if I were not the absolutely scrupulously honest person that I am, that could go awry.
Thank you for saying that.
Writing checks to all kinds of people for all manner of things, and I can imagine how awful it must be. So that's why I'm scrupulous about it. I think I'll fix it by saying no more of this loosey-goosey stuff. If y'all are going to have a big event, call me. I'll give you my debit card. You go and make the purchases, and then I can pull up those purchases directly from our bank account.
That's beautiful.
End of story.
We are going to review invoices and backup in great details further on the road, but this is related to the budget, and you see how those two things are connected. Because what you choose to include in your budget, if you have a big amount on your miscellaneous for all those items, sometimes you have to. Again, this is really important to understand. We're not telling you don't do that. We're just saying recognize that when you build your budget, that will then further down the road will affect how you are able to bill us and invoice us on a monthly basis. These are intimately connected. All right, we will go further into further detail. Trust me, there's lots to go over there. When you create a budget and you have people working for you, but you do not consider them staff, and they are not in the line item or staff, but they go under consultants and contracts in direct operating. And I have a sample budget where I will show you where that goes. Please do not confuse the two. Only when you have actual hired staff, that's where that goes in the personnel. And when you have different consultants, they deserve their own each line item in your budget. If somebody is working for you for marketing, you have a consultant for marketing, and then that's where you describe the kind of salary payment you give them for their services. Sometimes during the year, you recognize that you have made some miscalculation around the budget you provided at the beginning. We do allow for budget modification, and we've done that with several of you. So I want to recognize, for those of you who don't know this process exists, We could modify the budget. Let's say you budgeted for a consultant that was going to do your communications, and that plan did not come through. There's a lot of money in that line item, which you can then use elsewhere because you haven't really paid a person that didn't provide service. We can go through the process. There is a special form, it's called budget modification form, and I share that with villages who want to make this modification. You need to submit a new budget, the old budget, and the form. So 3 things. And typically speaking, we do approve those unless they're completely unreasonable, which doesn't really happen a lot. But there is a deadline which is passed. So if you are going to do a budget modification, I am really sorry, but consider that for next year. We start asking you right now to look into the budget, how much money you've spent from your contract amount. And if you anticipate any surplus, we need to know. So start looking at that. We don't have the deadline. I'm not sure, David, if you have a deadline for that. We still have some time, but we really do need to know if A, you plan to spend the full amount, and I do want to hear from every single one of you. I plan to spend my full amount, or B, I don't plan on spending on my full contract amount. Here's how much money I think I will be using, because we do a process called encumbrance, where we tell our accounting, please hold on to $3,000 on this contract because they will be billing us past the end of the fiscal year.
May I? Correction, it's the accrual process, and it's what is named here the year-end process, and it's a big deal around here. And it doesn't have to be a painful process by any means. For most of you, we have monthly invoices, and we see the trend, and you know, we might not even ask you if we see. I won't use names, but one of you is billing us regularly for personnel expenses every month. And it's very easy for us to look out and say, okay, 3 months left at X dollars because the monthly amount is similar or the same. It's clear that we will spend this down or very close to it. On our end, we will tell our Office of Finance, we want to reserve, accrue all of the funds so that if we receive an invoice in July for June, that's still our money. We're still going to pay it to this vendor. So we go to great lengths to reserve, to accrue funds that is yours for regular operating purposes. It's information that we need, and we can't always see your spending trend because many of your invoices go up or down, or there are some who don't invoice us regularly, and we'll come back to that. Anyway, one of these days soon, they've already started scheduling the refresher trainings for us. We're going to jump into this process, and we'll try to make it easy for you. And like I said, it doesn't have to be painful at all.
All right, so what is inflationary adjustments? These are added funds that county executive can decide on an annual basis to give you as a kind of cost of living increases, accounting for inflation. Sometimes the inflationary adjustments, the level of confidence we have is high in the sense that, oh, the current budgeted amount is, for example, this year was X amount, county executive put in 6% inflationary adjustment. Our contract management team said, like, we have high level of confidence that this would actually be voted on with county council, which is a process that comes later on the year. So we're asking you for the budgets to include both whatever you have right now and add the 6%. Last year, there wasn't that level of confidence for a variety of reasons, which are completely not relevant to us. And so you guys submitted a budget, and then we asked you to submit another budget to include the inflationary adjustments so that we had actually 2 budgets come from you. That might happen again next year. I don't know what's going to happen. But if we ask you for 2 budgets, please forgive us. It's only because we're trying to be cautious around how we manage our contracting process. And when we ask you for a second budget, after we have issued already your new purchase order, which is changing every year, then you will get a new purchase order, and all of you should have gotten 2 purchase orders for this fiscal year. One is for the original contract amount, and the second is for the 3% increase. So your last invoice, for convenience reason, I'm suggesting that should actually have 2 POs, because, or you can have a submit, and David, I don't know if you want to do that. Or you should submit 2 invoices with 2 different PO number. And there has to be a match between the PO number, which is, for example, with these 3%, and the amount of money in it. So for example, if you have $300 on that purchase order, you can create an invoice for 300. David, you have to jump in here. I've not done this before. I don't know how you would suggest you do that. Or can one invoice include 2 purchase order numbers in them?
Yeah. I think there's 2 things we ask with regards to purchase orders, because we don't want, it's kind of a technicality, and we don't want you to dwell on our technicalities to the extent possible. You have a contract, and every contract, most contracts, have money associated with them, and that money gets to you in a purchase order. You might have 1 or more purchase orders. Your invoices should have the contract number on it. We'll come back to this. And it should have correct purchase order numbers on it. You could leave to us, Kate, I see your comment. We'll return to that again, I think. You can send us an invoice. It'll have, we want the contract number on it. In all cases, you'll only have 1 contract number, except where something unusual happens, like Silver Spring and Kemp Mill, or Little Falls, and I forget how this all happened. You actually had 2 contracts this year. That's the exception. You have a contract, it has money in it, and the money gets to you through a purchase order. So you're billing us for your funds, put the correct purchase order numbers on the invoice, and you could leave to us the allocation of the funds to each purchase order. So you'll have a purchase order for $20,000. We'll try to spend that first, and then you'll have a separate purchase order for your $2,000 inflationary adjustment, and we'll spend that second.
Okay,
If you can account for those separately, that's fine, but we'll make sure that happens. But what we want is for the correct purchase order numbers, correct contract numbers to be on your invoices.
So can I just ask a quick question? Are purchase orders and contract numbers different things? You have 1 contract order, you might have 2 you might have 2 purchase orders.
Right.
But they're separate.
They are different things, yes. Yes.
So contracts are usually signed for a term of average 3 years, but purchase orders change annually. So when you create invoices, you have to be very mindful about, okay, am I using the right contract number or the right purchase order number for this particular year that I'm in?
So Kate, I'm looking at your purchase order, right? This is the current. I think this is the current year. So you have a contract number 1123340 and a purchase order of 1133469, totally different numbers. Contract number will likely go on forever or go on until we start over. Purchase order will change every time there's money added to your contract.
Okay. So if now I'm starting to remember last year we had to submit things a couple times for the different purchase orders. So I probably need to look for that.
Yep. So be mindful of that.
You should receive an email upon completion of, let's see, when your contract is fully signed, you should receive an email from our contract office that says, this is your notice to proceed with the work under contract, blah, 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 blah. And it'll have a copy of either the whole contract, or if we're just amending a little 1-page statement saying we're amending, and your purchase order. So those are worth saving. You should be doing that. Those are key fiscal documents.
There are some people who are new to this process here, and they are not the contact person for our contract management team. you need to let me know if that contact person changes, because sometimes important documents were sent to the wrong people who then did not forward it to the person who needed to have them. So internal communication is critical. Either you just send it to the right person, or I think you need to let me know so I can update everybody in the county about who needs to receive this kind of communications on your end.
Yeah, they actually will update their database for that. They
Yeah.
want to make sure they're communicating with the right person.
Yep. So for example, Helen, if you want to be the contact person, or if you wish to keep Lisa, and I need to know that when changes are made like that. Okay, we're going to review a sample budget. Some of you have seen that already. We really prefer that you use this template, but you don't need all the line items. So because it's in an Excel spreadsheet, you have the freedom to delete certain line items, but this is the most comprehensive. That's where you start from. The contract needs to include your information, so we know whose contract it is.
Oh, can I say something?
Yes, please.
You see line 8, service area? People will put that, all that is, I wish they didn't do that, aging and disability services, that's us. People will say zip code, 20906 through, and it's really intended as a, what section of HHS is that? So you
Maybe
can
next
forget
time I
that now.
send it, I will delete it.
You could, yeah, you can forget that now that I've said it.
I've deleted that.
Okay.
Didn't happen ever. Okay. This is kind of a summary and overarching view of where the big pockets of money. You see there's A, B, C, and then there's indirect and total. That helps us see just the general overview of the budget. But then we go into further detail. Section A is about staff and staff only. As I've said, no consultant going here. People have asked me about this full-time equivalent, and what we do is we need to ask you the position, who is the person in that position, what is their annual salary. If they work part-time, I think we need to know their current salary, even if it's part-time. But then you write here for the contract. Oh, wait, let me just explain this. If you're charging us for a percentage of this person's budget, then you write it here.
Why don't you put a number in the annual salary position?
Okay.
Put $50,000 in there. Yeah, okay. We talk in terms of FTEs here. So
Full-time equivalents, for those who don't know what FTE is.
and if you're charging this contract 50% of it, then 0.5 goes in there. And you have, let's say you fundraise for the other 25,000. So it'll do the calculation for you.
So basically, this is how much this is how much you pay this person on an annual basis. This is the portion for which you're going to be billing us in the contract, and I will give you the dollar amount. If you have fringe, you can write it here. What's our fringe rate? I don't remember on top of my head.
Oh, call it, I don't know, I would call it 15%, 0.15.
0.15?
Yeah. And it'll calculate again. That's how this is intended to be used.
So Pazit, could I point out a oddity about this form?
Yes.
Sometimes if you have a contract that's a nice round number, say $10,000, and you put in someone's salary, sometimes you have to, on that FTE column, sometimes you have to carry it out to 7, 8, 9, 10 decimal digits to get it to add up correctly. So people should just be aware of that, realize that you can play with it.
Yep, you can play with the numbers here. You're very correct. And I've helped certain villages with their math because they got stuck with that. So I'll just give you an example. Let's say the amount here, if the contract is for 8,000, let's say I want to reach 8,000 here, I need to go back here and do 0.3 and see what that brings me, 15, so 0.15. Ooh, that gives me 7,500, but the total, notice there's going to be fringe as well.
Wait,
so
what happened? Total fringe, 15 cents. Something wrong with the formula there.
Here.
Row 39, total fringe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a missing formula there, but
Okay, we'll correct.
Apologies on behalf of the department, these forms.
But let's assume we're not doing fringe. We're just focusing on how to get to 8,000. Just to say, okay, 1.56. I've actually done this month, and it's actually kind of fun because it's like it's a game. Okay, 561. What happens then? Okay, so you get the gist. Unless you really want me to reach 8,000, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Okay. This is where most of you guys have your items. It's the direct operating expenses. Notice that consulting here is just one item, but one line item. But as I've said, if you have more than one consultant, each one of them requires their own line. And in justification, you simply need to know the salary, whether it is out, not salary, sorry, how much you pay them, whether it is hourly or per project, and what are exactly the deliverables. So if you pay somebody to do your marketing, you can say marketing consultant for $30 an hour at $20 at 20 hours, total amount is $600. So you write here, marketing consultant costs 600. And here you say, sorry, I was going to say $30. $30 an hour times, what did they say? 20 hours. Something like that. So now we understand, okay, what are you going to do? How much is the total cost? And how do you break down the cost to justify the total cost? This is how you build your budget around those consultants. Questions or additions? All right. These is a whole list of different items that are traditionally.
Aziz,
Yes.
if you didn't say this, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Kate, I saw your message, and I'll let's make sure we address it.
Yeah, I didn't want to I guess this is hard because you're doing so many different scenarios and so many different, so I don't want to hog.
No, we'll make sure we if you think this will enlighten everyone,
Okay.
let's do it, or we can talk separately.
Indeed, I guess my question, I'm all the way, I'm still up. This is all making sense, but I'm up at the budget summary. And it kind of goes back to that. I've got my language here. Your sort of that purchase order confusion I'm in right now. In the 23 form, for example, what do I put under direct operating expenses, and then that indirect administration expense, the inflation piece? I guess I'm confused where to put things. And if I did it right, will you let me know? And if not, how can I make it better?
I'm looking at, Kate, I'm looking at your FY23 budget now. And it looks, we signed it, it looks like you did just fine. And
okay.
And
that's one purchase order. You don't, do you think you're going to do two purchase orders?
I believe, no, this year you will only receive one purchase order. Everyone should, unless the county council disagrees with the county executive.
Okay.
Changes the amount of the inflationary adjustment or does something else. You should all receive one purchase order, one purchase order with your FY23 contract, unless there's something that happens.
Which include the inflation adjustment.
We built that in. Some of you submitted 2 versions of the budget, and some of you one, and those are the lucky ones. But
that's when Pazit said, "Hold the phone, everybody, wait for a second," and then she sent the next email that said, "Go ahead and submit it with that inflation." Okay.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. Keep going. I'm still caught up.
Yep. You see how as you enter information that gets fed into the big one, so you won't have to do the big summary because it will be a summary or addition for the total number of budget items you put here.
And
okay.
Pazit,
yes.
If you have multiple consultants, please add lines. Or if you're not going to have a staff development category, row 44, just you know, than say communication consultant or, you know, but
Yep.
they want to see each person. And you're free to add lines and even delete them if you're not using a travel or a rent or a utilities line.
Yeah, and ideally, if you already know who is the consultant going to be, it will be good for us to know that person's name or a company. So you can say here, for example, $38 an hour, 20 hours. Where is my cell here for Martha? Where is it? Stewart for her brilliant, whatever.
Bubblegum marketing campaign.
Okay. As David said, you can delete the ones you're not going to be using just for cleanliness and neatness of your budget. These can give you ideas on things you can charge us if you are building your budget and you're not sure what would be the best way to use the money. But the important point I want to make here is this. When you allocate $600 for this consultant, Martha Stewart, and you don't spend as much money in your invoices on an annual basis, then you have leftover money in that line item. Or alternatively speaking, if you only put $600 in that line item and then you start charging us for much more than $600, then we have a problem. There has to be a complete match between how much money you allocated for each line item and then how much money you're billing us and then the year-to-date aggregates. If you're seeing a mismatch and you want to make changes, that's fine. We might need to do a budget modification. In some cases, it's not necessary, but please contact me. And that's happened a few times that there was this mismatch and that was cause for great confusion and lengthy delay in processing time, because then we had to start from scratch. Wait a minute, how much money did you want to spend there? Did you really put the right amount in your budget? Do you need to do a new budget? And if not, so this whole back and forth is a great headache for everybody. So try to be as intentional as possible when you put those numbers here in column D, because these would be, and I'm going to show you an invoice I'd like you to use moving forward, starting new FY, because I don't want to just change your stuff in mid-year, but starting the new FY, a new invoice to help us keep track of the different line item and then how much money you have left. It will really help you see where you are in each line item and how much money you have left there, so that are you on track or not. These things are pretty self-explanatory. You add all these expenses that you consider as your direct cost. Capital expenses are traditionally not something villages do. Feel free to delete that column C, and then I need your signature and date, and you can send it to me to sign and date. This is ensured the budget. We don't have much time, so I'm going to stop sharing and go back to our PowerPoint. No, this is what we need.
I'll ask Helen while we're transitioning. Did my answer satisfy your chat question?
I didn't see the answer.
Okay, it's in there. You don't, if you're, may I, for everyone's benefit?
Definitely.
I'll just make up a number. Let's say you want to pay a consultant $5,000, but you only want to charge the contract half of that. Then just show $2,500 on your budget.
Do I have to show the 5,000 anywhere?
No, you don't. You
Okay.
Not
That
in the
was-
budget, but when you pay, we need to see, we will have to see how much you paid them, because you would be paying them 5,000.
Right.
And you can say in your note, I'm charging to the contract half of that.
Okay, got it.
Good point.
All right. So some of you have been extremely tardy in sending their monthly invoices. This is not okay. I am not going to name names, though maybe next year we'll do the Hall of Shame and I will be like flagging people publicly with my shameful denunciation. But please note that we do expect monthly invoices, especially if you have monthly expenses. If you've been spending monthly, all these things, insurance, phone bill, prints, consultants, and then you send me one big ginormous invoice for all these months, that is not cool.
So will you give me an example of an accurate time per month, like
Yes.
within, like by If it's April 1st,
Ideally-
you get paid, April
Yeah.
15th, that should be submitted by.
So there's two components here. Ideally, you would have made payments for previous month's expenses by the 15th of the month, and that would actually clear in the bank. So let's say the month of July, you pay consultants, you pay for refreshments, you pay for phone bill and for insurance and for Club Express. All these expenses are made in the month of July. And then in the 15th of August, you can look in your bank statements, the check is cleared, everything has come out already. If it's a recurrence, direct, not direct deposit, so direct payment from your bank account, you see AT&T charge for $40 on the 7th of August, and all these things happening by that time. So then you can send an invoice, and then the invoice reflects all the expenses you've made in the month of July. And David is going to jump in a minute, but you can only bill us for things that are actually cleared and paid for. You can say, I've actually paid for this expense. If that would mean another week's delay and you give us an invoice on the 20th of August for expenses made in July, that's okay too, so long as we can actually track those things. David.
Yeah, okay, I want to come back to the contract. Let me start there.
Okay.
The direct answer to the question is that the contract, section 5, and I don't think I know how to share screen, or I would put up the language in a new FY22 contract. The contractor must submit monthly invoices to the county contract monitor no later than 15 days after the end of each month. It's built into the contract. And then to follow up on what Aziz talking about, the timing issue, if you are still waiting for a July statement from a vendor, you can send us the July invoice and submit that statement with the August invoice. We're not Puritans in that sense. You know, we want to make sure everything gets paid. If you would prefer to hold it because you know something's coming, then hold it. That's okay. But technically the contract, everyone's contracts say something like the 15th of the following month.
All right, so you need to be as regular as possible. And the invoices that we said, you need to note your PO and contract. I can't tell you how many times I have failed to review these properly, and then I get it bounced back, or we have people who have to go back to your PO and contract and correct it for you. Please take the time to review that and make sure that as the year change and as the PO number change, that you are adjusting it appropriately so that things get processed quickly and smoothly. Invoices have to have unique invoice number. You can't say invoice number 2 because we can't search it up in our databases. You can look at example, for example, VOK 0322 is a good way of noting the village initials, the month of the invoice, and the year. That's easy and clear, and you can never make mistakes of repeating the same number again. David, your hand is up. Is it about this or from previous
Oh,
comments?
well, I'm glad it's up because I was sitting here thinking, how am I gonna answer Anne's question? I should have done that a second ago. So I guess I've been trying to answer in the chat. Let me try to answer it verbally. Anne says, if you pay insurance for the year, do you have to, Anne, I believe you mean, do you have to convert that to a monthly expense? My answer to that is we will pay multi-month expenses like that. It's just the nature of insurance. If you're paying it monthly, that's probably preferable. We have had occasions where we've paid in advance for something, and then in the worst case, a vendor goes out of business, or their sub-vendor goes out of business and we've already paid them. And that, we try to avoid situations like that. But for insurance, for an organization, yeah, you don't have to break it into 12 pieces if you're paying a 6-month period, or you don't have to break it into 6 pieces.
But we do need to see documents that shows what is this amount and what month, what period it covered.
Period, yeah. What period?
So we
does it
have to
cover?
have, so when you provide documentation about them, we'll get that into documentation a little bit further down, is we need to see if this is a monthly expense or annual expense, we need to see what month it was paid for or what period in the year it was paid for pretty clearly. Okay, we cannot charge taxes. I can't tell you how many times that gets slipped. You know, if you go to the grocery store and you buy bubble gum, you pay taxes on bubble gum, and you forget to take that, please remember to review your receipts and eliminate all taxes. You shouldn't be paying taxes. When you make expenses, you're a nonprofit. Make sure to have your nonprofit status and your tax exempt ready for purchases, so you won't have to spend money where not necessary.
Did I miss the previous bullet about line item?
Yeah, we
budgets?
already talked about that. I didn't want to repeat myself.
I was trying to figure out how to answer Anne. Okay, good. Thank you.
And I will say it again here. So, okay, this is the invoice you would be seeing as a template. Now it's a simplified one for conversation purposes, but note that this, you see those different in description, personnel, fringe, indirect, and operating. As many line items as you've created in your budget, if you have consultants, if you have a prints, if you have phone, your invoice every month should be a mirror of your annual budget. And so here in the year-to-date expenditure, here in the month, you'd say, here's how much money I've spent on each one line item. And here is how much money I've spent to date. Here's the total contract amount that I know is in my budget. And here's how much money is left. So everybody are on the same page. So let's say I contracted, instead of going back to our consultant for $600 for marketing, that number would be here on this column, contract budget amount. Let's say this month not personnel, I'm going to say here under operating. It wouldn't be personnel. This month, this person spent working 3 hours and charges $60. So $60 would be in this line. This is July, so it will be the first time. So $60 here, 600 minus 60, so 540. Sorry, contract amount 600, and here would be the 540. Every month you do this math.
Just one aside, I wish I'd had this 2 years ago. It would have made our collective lives a whole lot easier. Okay. I was reinventing the wheel every couple of months.
I apologize.
No, it's not your fault. I should have asked somebody. Has somebody done this before? You know?
Yeah, we try. I mean, for me, it was balancing, not burdening you guys with too much, because I know that most of you are volunteers. Doing this is above and beyond. So what is that fine line between what's the minimal acceptable documentation versus just burdening you with stuff? So I think you all have grown up organizationally speaking, to the point that these are standards for all professional nonprofits, and it's really good for you to have those things in place.
Yeah.
So
I think the county, I think HHS offers, maybe even mandates training to contractors. Have any of you attended that? Does that ring a bell?
I haven't seen communications about that, David.
No, it's been a while. I will go back to our compliance person and ask her if there's another one happening. But Tammy, I really appreciate your saying that. That was the intention of these, is to talk about basics.
Yep.
The templates are great. If it had the template in there, I would have done it right the first time. I don't do it wrong because I'm perverse. Okay.
Where do we find this template?
Sorry.
Where do we find this template? Is that something that gets sent?
Yeah, I have a couple of these templates. I can resend them.
But I want a couple of things. I would like to drive home the point about the budget and the invoices matching, but I also want to acknowledge that I've been using the chat feature wrong, directing all my comments to Kate. And now I see how that's supposed to work. I answered Anne out loud. I see a question from Doug. If there's multiple staff in the budget, do we combine into a single personnel line? The answer is no, and we'll come back to that in just a second. I think that was the other question. Okay. So Pazit and I convened to review these notes just a little too late before we got together. I would have liked to show an actual invoice and redacted, identifying information to show that if there are 2 or 3 people working in as merit personnel or as wage earners for the organization, there should be a line for each of them. There can be a single fringe, a combined fringe for all salary expenses. The county has tried to make that easy by, just setting a fringe rate for the organization. And then for operating, if you have 2 consultant lines, then your invoice should show those 2 consultants, even if there's 0 expenses. Then if there's a mileage line, whether or not there's mileage, there should be a mileage line on this invoice. So this template that we're sharing is just the starting point. And I will, when we're done here, I'm going to try to find a good example of an invoice that contains more of the detail, and then you can tailor that. You can eliminate rather than add, and that might be more helpful. We'll send you both.
Get rid of this.
Yeah, we'll send you templates for the budget again, this invoice template, and then a copy of this PowerPoint and a link to this video so people can rewatch it. Okay, back up. So we touched on that on a few instances because I think that's where the most hang up is. And it's really important that when you think about how you can get money from us, you need to actually make a purchase in a particular month. So whether it is you've paid for a phone bill, you've purchased refreshment, you've paid a consultant, and then you need to see proof that you've actually made that payment. And that's where things get really hung up. What constitutes proof of payment? So you can use a combination of a canceled check, of the payroll documentations, of bank statements. A combination of that would be ideal. So a good invoice would show, if it's staff, a person's timesheet showing that this is the work that they had done, signed by whoever oversees their work for that particular month. And then a copy of the payroll detail expenditure, you can print that out. And then bank statement showing that the payroll cost had been paid on a particular month. If you pay somebody by check, we need to see their timesheet / if they're a consultant, their invoice to you saying, here's how many hours I worked in the month of July. It was 20 hours times 30, so $600. And then a check made out to that consultant on that amount for that month. And a canceled check, it cannot be just the front copy. We need to see the back end saying there's this, showing that it's been cashed. Or you can do the front of the check plus a bank statement with the check number, so you can see, oh yeah, that check number really was deducted on the village's account number. If you've paid in, let's say you needed to buy refreshments and that had been covered before, it's best if you use the same credit or debit number that we know belongs to the village with their professional account. And that's how we track, this was really made, this expense was made on this time by this bill. And then ideally what solves a lot of the problem is a combination of the receipts and bank statements. So we can do the match between the actual expense and showing the fact that it was indeed paid by your account on that month through the bank statement. Questions?
I think there's a second page to this if
Yeah.
first draft.
There's a couple of things. So do not mix personal and business. We've said that many times. It's even if you go to the store and you have to use it, let's say you're a village that something happened, you can't use the village's professional account. Here's what's going to happen. You go into the store, you can make your own purchases, put that aside, and then you do the village's purchases on a separate purchase. And then you need to then show us the receipt. You need to then show us how the village reimbursed you. So there's actually 2 layers of backup. You making the purchase, proving us that you've made the purchase, and then you need to show us that the village reimbursed you, and then the village need to show the amount is actually paid to that member, reimbursing them for that expense. So whenever you use a personal account, we have 2 added layers, another layer of backup necessary. The receipts, mostly those that you've spent on like the post office or Party City, very often come out really blurry. We need to see things super clearly, especially the date of the purchase, amount, as well as the payment method. So make sure that when you scan things, double check, open that scan to see, can they really see that information? Because if not, you will hear back from us. Okay.
You say
All
that
right.
hearing from you as if it's the worst thing that ever happened, but
What?
you say that hearing from you as if it's the worst thing that ever happened. I always enjoy hearing from you. Okay.
Can we just choose other opportunities to hear from me and not that? I call in for coffee and just chat. Anything but that.
Yeah, we want almost to rubber stamp invoices.
Yeah.
We want to get them through and out.
Yeah.
We get a lot of invoices.
This is,
Okay, go ahead.
yeah, this is Rick. And just one quick question, because I think our stuff is pretty simple. We have a consultant we cut checks for basically twice a month. You had mentioned about submitting invoicing by the 15th. Would you rather we wait until the 2 checks are cashed to submit it, or just do it the 15th and we might have 3 checks 1 month and 1 check 1 month?
Depends how long the delay is. If the check won't be cashed for, let's say, depends on your cash flow. We have no problem saving, the last half of the month to pay you the following month, if your cash flow allows that.
Yeah, I think we're okay. All right, I'll do some analysis and figure out whether, we'll be a few days late or adhere to the 15th and just, let the checks fall where they may.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it's just a
thanks.
few days, I would rather wait, because that goes to another thing we're going to talk about, which is invoicing us in the month of November for expenses made in July, and then in the month of December for things made in October, and things get really jumbled up. Ideally, we want to see some kind of order in the time you've made the expense and then the time you invoiced it.
And if I'll follow on that, without naming the village, this is a real example. And so if we receive a January invoice with a September time period, but we've in the interim already paid October, we have to stop and say, wait a minute, did we already pay this September invoice? This just adds to the burden. We're going back into the system to say, what have we paid already? Let's verify. And we've plenty of time, not necessarily here among you. We've caught people billing us twice for the same thing. I mean, not because they're trying to scam us. It's just being organized is good.
So we can use me as an example. We have a new treasurer, and so that is really difficult. I've noticed when how to know that it's been submitted, how to know that it's been paid, and then who to sort of follow up with on your end. And I don't want to burden anybody on the county side, but will we review a process that's happening on your end? We receive this, we look at it, and we get back to you within 2 weeks, with the check? Or is it sort of, sometimes it feels like the turnaround time, if I know it's going to come back within 2 weeks, then 2 weeks later and I haven't heard from you, I can reach out and say, is everything good over there?
Yeah.
You can always reach out to me, and I can always check in with Desiree about what's been made. And sometimes sometimes people think they send an invoice and it's never been received.
Right.
Sometimes I miss an email, so it's always good to check in with me.
Okay.
Don't hold back. That's my job.
And the emails do go directly to you, but have we gotten there yet? You know, send you the bill, the email.
Yep.
Okay.
I'll, oh geez, it came and went out of my head.
So while you think about that, I will say in
Okay.
terms of delays, we sometimes experience delays because when people don't submit invoices for a whole year and then we get 5 of them, then we experience backlog because we are limited with our staff.
Mhm.
So for everybody's sake, doing something on a regular basis eases the whole processing time and reduces delays on our end as well.
Okay, I will go back to the contract to answer your question. The contract also says that we have, I believe the contract language is 30 days from receipt of an acceptable invoice. So the clock is ticking on our end too, and often the problem is acceptable invoice.
Yep.
But yeah, you don't hesitate if you don't see payment. Sometimes the county does weird things like combine payments. If 2 invoices are paid close to the same time, you'll get a check for an amount you won't recognize. So pause for a second and look at the last 2 invoices, for instance, and maybe that's the answer, but don't hesitate to ask us.
Yep.
And
It's
the
always
county
great.
I will admit to being the problem child in a lot of these
Oh,
instructions.
Cami,
Okay.
you are not, if it was just one person, we would have one-on-one conversation. The reason we're doing this as a group is because there have been issues and we felt like this is something that we really want to make sure that this relationship is as smooth as possible with everybody. And I consider this, as you've said, like if we should have done this 2 years ago, let's put it that way, but we're doing it now and we're hopefully the next FY is going to be much easier for everybody.
Yes.
And
Okay.
can you guys continue to submit reimburse through check and sent
Yes.
to mailbox, right? You're not going to go online?
You can
Oh.
request a direct deposit. You don't need
Yeah.
to check.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, if anyone who wants their deposits, their payments to go direct to their banks, send us an email and
Yep.
we'll send you the form the county requires. I assume it's something like that, but yeah, lots do it.
And if you already do a direct deposit, I apologize if that was not clear that that's an option. It is definitely easier to track those through direct deposits. So it takes, I think, a delay of a month. So send me an email if you don't have a direct deposit, and I'll ask Desiree for help in getting you the right form.
Can you go up
Okay.
a slide, Pazit?
What?
Can you go up a slide or back a slide? Did I hear someone else trying to ask a question? I want to answer Ann's question.
I have a follow-up to that, David. Here's an example, and I think we all have these. So let's say in January, you pay for your URL service and it's good for a year. And do you bill then January to June and then you wait and July you bill July to January? Is that work, or can you bill for the whole year?
Well, the county's preference would be if you have an option to pay for the period, a shorter period that would keep you within the
Yeah.
fiscal year, the contract year, that you do that, and then we pay the second part the following year. But just like insurance, if you're paying for an annual URL renewal, then
Yeah.
just pay the annual URL renewal. Yeah.
Even if it's
That
going
makes it
into the
so
next
much easier.
FY.
Thank you.
And I remember an example, for the life of me can't remember who, I think it was a village, where there was a late June payment of just such an expense. And I wished that whoever did that had waited until July 1st or early in July. So that, because there have been people give up on their registry, their web, or they change the company that, in any case, it's just to try to keep things in the contract year. And so Anne asks in the chat about using Venmo and Zelle print screens as proof of payment. The problem with them is that alone, they often don't have the organization's name. They often don't have, what they show is very varied. You can never tell what we're going to get. if you, so it's generally not sufficient on its own. It often doesn't show the recipient, which I think is weird, but so to focus on this slide here, let's see, we need to see that you've paid for the service, a canceled check, bank statements, sometimes we receive bank statements that don't have the organization's name on it. That's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll have to pay this. What I want to avoid at all costs is asking my compliance team, because they're going to say, no, they have to have their organization. How do you know whose bank it is? And you know, we don't want to be figuring things out. Okay, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt, because then we're on the hook if the invoices are audited. Credit card statements, often I think the trend has been debit cards, which means a bank statement covers a lot of things, which is preferable because we don't need to see a credit card statement is full of things we don't need to see often. Paid or a receipt marked paid, beautiful. Canceled checks are, it's very, you know, you can see what's paid for, who the recipient is. You can see that it was posted, so that payment was real. Venmo can contribute to that. I mean, I guess take a look at it before you send it and say, is this showing? Are Pazit and David going to be able to follow the trail, you know, and rubber stamp it? Is this going to be a rubber stamp? That's what we want. We want it to be crystal clear, so we're not spending time figuring it out. There's one item, Pazit, I'd like to pause on, and that's one of you is submitting. This has to do, I think, with the phone bill. We've seen several versions of the monthly phone charge. One of them is a printout of the website, like the account website for the village, that shows a payment made. The other version is like the thing you'd get in the mail from the cell phone, from the phone vendor, which is all of the paper, you know, a million pages, which we don't need, but it shows the period of service. It shows that the previous payment was made. It shows the breakdown of the service. And I keep nagging Pazit, get me the big statement, because we can see the period of service, and it means I'm not having to go back. Actually, Pazit and I resolved an August-September issue just the other day, because the web, Pazit interpreted the backup that was provided to mean the prior month, when in fact the prior month had already been billed and documented. So regularity, consistency in the backup, want to see more rather than less. And in the case of phone bills, I think it's AT&T, sort of the traditional statement shows the period of service that's being billed for. And you know, a corresponding canceled check or bank statement showing, you know, very detailed AT&T X dollars posting on X date, and X date on the bank statement roughly matches the due date on the statement. That's beautiful. We can just move on, rubber stamp that.
The prepaid mobile phone service from Verizon, I think all the others, because they're greedy, they bill monthly in advance. So the payment that you make in October is for the succeeding 3 days. They collect the money up front. It's not monthly in arrears, it's monthly in advance.
And that's okay, you paid for it, and the payment is the thing. No, you're showing us that proof of payment, and you're showing us the period paid.
So for example, in that instance, if you're going to be paying prepay for the month of July in June, don't bill for this FY. You can bill for the one that the prepay in the end of May for June, and then hold off, even though, I mean, I don't know, when you pay it, but ideally you would wait until July 1st to make that payment for July.
Yeah. It's,
Kind of tricky.
Yeah, so the June, July gets tricky. We want to keep June payments. June services should be paid in the final June invoice. This is an obscure topic, but we're coming up to it. You don't want to, the county considers, once we've paid your final June invoice, if you come back in July with a June expense, county says that's ineligible because that was the prior year contract, the prior year purchase order. So the June invoice is one time where you want to sit tight, gather all your documentation, wait for the checks to be cashed, for instance, as we discussed earlier, and make sure everything is in there so we don't have to deny the payment in your July invoice and say to you, sorry, that was the last year expense. The division between June and July, between one fiscal year and another, is really important to the county.
And we can accept invoices for the previous, let's say you have accrued $2,000. You can wait until you have all your expenses and then submit that even in August, and that's has happened because
Oh,
people
yes.
needed to wait until everything got cleared so they can actually show us that they've paid all these things back in June. That's okay. We will still approve those expenses.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we're coming up to year end. We're going to start telling the fiscal team, this Silver Spring Village is going to spend all their money. So we want you to hold the remaining $2,000 of funds. We're going to accrue those funds. If you don't have all your receipts and your backup gathered until August, that's okay. Your money's safe because we've accrued it. But like I said, we're reserving it for you guys. So you don't have to rush your things together. Take the time to gather things, and with the line between June and July being the marker. You're waiting on payment for June services. And if that means you have to nag your vendors, come on, cash that check or send me a bill, then you have to.
yeah, I have walked a check down the street to our consultant and said, apparently you don't need your money, but you need to get your car right now and go cash this thing today, because you're making my life miserable, and Pazita's going to call me, and that's going to be the end of your tenure as our consultant. Okay, Jen? And she did it.
Yeah, I'm happy being used as a whip to get stuff going with your vendors. Anything else we want to say about this slide? Because we are already over time and I want to make sure we cover everything. All right. So things that cause for delay, I'm not going to get into this too much because I think it's pretty self-explanatory that whenever we get any of those things previously stated incorrect, that would cause for a delay, because then I have to review things. I have to get back to you. You need to do your thing. Or sometimes I miss stuff. I send it up to David, and that where things get delayed, because then he sees things, he sends it back to me, and then I send it back to you. So these are all causes for delay. So please be as intentional and as detail oriented as you can when you submit those invoices. I'm not going to say much more about that. Want to cover some special situations that have come up so that you all are aware of it. When you give staff a raise, we need to know about that. There is some issues with what is acceptable and what's not. So it's kind of tricky for us. We don't want to get into the business of your organization and how much you pay your staff. But if things are excessive, then we might deny certain things because you might be overpaying on services. That's never happened, but I think you can just give us an invoice and say, okay, now you used to be able to buy 30 hours of this executive director's time. Now you can only get 20 hours out of that. So basically your contract money buys less service than we initially agreed on. So these things needs to be discussed with us before you submit anything. We also need to see backup, so contracts or letters given to your staff, or is it if it's a consultant, noting any kind of change on rate, whether it is for salary or consultant. It's really important. If you have a new consultant, we need to see the contract with them. What did you sign? What did this person say they would deliver? What are the amounts and what are the deliverables? All these things are added to your file for backup when we get audited. So when we approve in a budget that you're going to be working with a marketing contractor consultant, we need to know, what did we buy? And so that is gets the backup for that is the agreed contract with that person.
I think one of you at least will remember a recent occurrence where our compliance team said, okay, so one of the villages wants to give a raise. Show us a letter from the board approving the raise and the reason for it. Does that ring a bell, Pazit? Or am I just imagining?
Yes, it is. The person, yeah. And they had to do that. And some of the villages are so informal, they just like decide to do that. But again, we're going for professional standards, and you are a professional nonprofit organization. And if you have agreements, whether it is with a staff person or a consultant, you need to have documentation to back those agreements up. All right. If you want to change the way you spend the money, we talked about that. That's a budget modification process. We're not going to get into that, but let me know. This year is already too late, but for next year, if mid-year you realize, whoa, we've made some errors in the way we projected the expenditure patterns, we want to make some changes, perfectly okay. We've done that. It's not such a painful process. Just know that it is possible to get that done before April 15th. And again, we've talked about what happens when you don't receive payment. Just call me. And I think that pretty much sums up what we wanted to cover today. I don't know if we have any last words of wisdom to impart on people, David, or if people have last final questions.
Take questions. I'm really glad to see all your faces, seeing your names and many of them, and asked a lot of questions about you, but it's a pleasure to talk to you directly, and don't hesitate to reach out. Yeah, but we can still take more questions. I have a little more time.
I'm the newbie here, and I just wanted to say this was extraordinarily helpful. And I'm glad I didn't do this 2 years ago. I have to figure it all out on my own.
Yeah, well, this session will be recorded, so any newbies such as yourself will have access to this training. And if you feel the need, we need to do a refresh or focus on a particular component, we're happy to do that as well.
Yeah.
All right.
Got some amended invoices to submit, don't I?
Well,
Yeah.
look at what you've sent me. I mean, I've approved your invoices, Tammy, so it's not as though things have been so chaotic. So why don't you hold off and see if I have any input to give you? It might be that you're okay.
Oh, okay. So, well, I mean, I've got a lot more paper for you. You sure you don't want it?
Send me what you have, and if I have any questions for you, I'll let you know.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, dear everybody. We are hereby adjourned. Thank you, David, for joining in, and you know where to find me if you have any questions.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Pazit.
Yeah.
I know I was not great recently doing this.